December of 1973, Warner Brothers released The Exorcist into 24 theaters. Despite receiving initially mixed critical reviews, it was an immediate hit with audiences. Perhaps it was the dubious claim that it was based on a true story that turned it from being just another scary movie. The story of two brave priests fighting to expel the demon Pazuzu from an innocent girl struck a nerve with moviegoers, in some cases quite literally. Stories emerged about audience members becoming physically and mentally affected by the film. Audience members fainting or vomiting was not uncommon.
I went to check it out. The manager of the National Theater in Westwood says that there indeed are at least a dozen people who faint or become ill during every showing. But The Exorcist is still drawing sellout houses for every performance, complete with lines around the block. Do you remember what particular scene it was that...
When she was in, what was it? When she was in a room, the doctors came in, and she was, and when, I guess it was when she was talking the devil's voice. Oh God, I can't believe it.
What was it that made that happen?
When she started talking like devil coming out of her.
How about you?
I can't even describe it. It's so horrible. It just... I don't know why I waited 4 hours to see that.
The devil made her did it, I bet.
This begs the question, how and why does art have this kind of effect on us? As audience members, we know we are looking at something which is just an imitation of real life. When we engage with art, we must often intentionally avoid critical thinking and logic in order to temporarily believe that what we are seeing is real. This is called the suspension of disbelief, and it is the first hurdle for any fiction trying to capture an audience's attention. We know that a scary movie is just a data file on a Blu-ray disc, or that a tense video game is just an elaborate web of zeros and ones that respond to a button press on our controller. We know that art is just that. Art. It cannot physically harm us. Or at least, some of us know that.
Why do you have a copy of The Shining in your freezer?
Oh, I was reading it last night and I got scared, so...
But you're safe from it if it's in the freezer?
Well, safer.
We know that horror media cannot harm us. So why do we jump in our seats at what is essentially just flashing images on the wall? Why does our heart race in anticipation as we watch the final girl try to outrun the monster that is on her heels? This is a question that has always interested me, in part because while we all get scared, we don't all get scared at the same things. For example, look at any one of the many quote-unquote real-life ghost hunter shows on television. These things are insanely popular because many people believe in ghosts, so these shows are scary. But for those of us who don't believe in ghosts, like yours truly, these shows are about as scary as, well...
We are now inside the house where the celebrity ghosts have been spotted. Whoa, what was that? What was that?
What was what?
Did you hear that? It was like a... Is there a spooky ghost here? Look! What is that? What is that? I'm pretty sure that's their television! Oh man, I am really scared!
Personally, I never found The Exorcist to be scary. I always found it to be a bit silly and overwrought. The first time I heard the guttural demon's voice coming out of Linda Blair's mouth, I actually laughed out loud. Maybe because the voice of the demon reminded me way too much of comedic actor William Hickey.
Well, then let's introduce ourselves. I'm Damien Karras.
And I'm the devil.
Ed's Tropical Aquarium. Mattress City. Donuts, donuts, donuts.
But I love a good horror film. The last 20 minutes of the British horror thriller The Kill List was so intense that it had me gripping the theater armrests so tight it gave me hand cramps for hours afterward. The recent American horror film It Follows actually managed to give me nightmares. That's something that no other horror film has ever been able to do before. Some people find The Grudge to be a terrifying film. Myself, I remember getting to the part where they had a little Japanese boy meowing, and I laughed so hard in the theater I thought they were going to ask me to leave. Do you remember the Blair Witch Project? Easily one of the most divisive horror films ever made. People either thought it was a horror masterpiece because it left so much to the imagination, while others saw it as more like,
okay, they're in the woods. The camera keeps on moving. I think they're looking for some witch or something. I don't know. I wasn't listening. Nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. Something about a map. Nothing's happening. It's over. A lot of people in the audience look pissed.
So is horror simply a matter of taste? Maybe. But I think there is a more compelling answer to this question, and it has to do with the way we think and reason about the world around us. Maybe understanding how and why we get scared might tell us a great deal about the way our minds work.
In these episodes, as we elucidate the how and the whys of what makes something scary, underlying it all is what horror is ultimately doing to us. Perhaps it might be useful to provide a provisional definition of the psychology of horror. There are a variety of mechanics and theories at play in the phenomenological experience of horror, but when we get right down to it, it is the psychology surrounding the dissolution or threat of dissolution of one's ability to find, create, or maintain meaning. When the rules of the universe seem to be ripped out from under you, and all that you are left with is the void staring back at you.
So, in this first episode of Be Kind, Rewind, we're going to take a look at the psychology of reasoning and fear. And to do that, we're going to talk about Resident Evil 7. Why? Because I think the Baker family have a lot to teach us about fear.
Welcome to the family, son.
A sense of agency refers to the feeling of control over actions and their consequences. When we make voluntary actions, we tend not to feel as though they simply happen to us. Instead, we feel as though we are in charge. The sense of agency refers to this feeling of being in the driving seat when it comes to our actions. Psychologist Albert Bandura posited 4 ways in which people exercise agency. They are intentionality, forethought, self-reactiveness, and self-reflectiveness. With intentionality, we develop action plans and strategies for realizing them. Forethought allows us to think about the likely outcomes of our actions, often motivating us to take action. Self-reactiveness and self-reflectiveness are the ways in which we practice functional self-awareness. We reflect on the outcomes of our actions, the good as well as the bad, and this is what enables us to make corrective adjustments of our thoughts and actions. In other words, agency is a critical part of human reasoning. It's how we make sense of ourselves and the world around us. So let's talk about what happens when agency is taken away and how game design can create horror in the player. In March of 1996, Capcom released the first Resident Evil, basically creating the survival horror genre overnight. For those who are not familiar with the term, survival horror is not just another variation on the adventure game genre. Many games center on turning you into the biggest badass around, a steady dopamine drip of achievement and skill progression so that by the end of the game, you are a digital John Wick. Most games empower the player. Survival horror is the inverse. It is a genre designed to make the player feel vulnerable. From the ambiance, to the story, to the very gameplay itself, everything is designed to make the player feel insignificant. The genius of the first Resident Evil was making you play as an elite trained soldier who would be right at home in any other action shooter title. But here, in the Spencer Mansion setting of the game, it didn't matter how badass your character was, because your opponents were going to keep coming at you even after you emptied your gun into them. The experience was unique for the time, and it made the game an instant hit. It spawned multiple other games in the series, as well as toys, a movie series, and even several stage plays. However, as the series progressed, it was criticized by some for straying too far from its horror roots. It was becoming more of a straightforward action series. This trend of actionification peaked with 2012's highly divisive Resident Evil 6. It garnered a love it or hate it reaction from the fanbase, as some saw it as the series jumping the shark, while others wondered if they could add a few more sharks for the next jump. One thing was clear: it was time for the series to hit the reset button. At E3 in 2016, Capcom announced Resident Evil 7 to the world. The third-person perspective globe-trotting horror series was now suddenly in first person, and it was taking place in a single mysterious location. All right. Buddy, I'm trying to record here. Hey, yes, you're very cute. You're very cute. Okay, buddy, I can't do this with you in my lap, okay? All right? Hey, buddy, get off me. Oh, come on. All right. All right, you're in my lap. Are you happy now? You're making this very difficult. Right. I rub your belly. You be quiet? I guess you will. Okay. We'll go for a walk in a little bit, okay? Alright. Capcom wanted to return the Resident Evil series to its roots as a truly frightening experience. Reviewers and gamers were largely in agreement that with Resident Evil 7, they had succeeded. At this point, we might ask, why? Why is this effective at scaring us while mowing down hordes of the undead is not? The most immediately apparent answer is the first-person perspective. In theory, the first-person point of view enables us to become more invested in what is happening in front of us. For comparison, watch the following scenes carefully.
Yourself, keep running into dead ends. Why don't you face it, Rafe? You need us.
No, you're right. You're half right. I just need Sam.
Wait, now you're making a mistake.
Hey, don't listen!
Fuck you! It's okay, man. I'm gonna chill here, man. I'm gonna chill. The thing is, alright? The thing is, I killed you once already. And it's not like I am fucking crazy. It's okay. It's like water under the bridge. Did I ever tell you the definition of insanity?
Oh, Jesus. No.
Oh, fuck you!
Both of these are cutscenes, and both scenes feature the main protagonist who you control over the course of the game. And yet, which one of these did you find personally the most intense? I'm willing to bet it's the second one. It's no exaggeration to say that the dramatic rise of computer technology in the last few decades has radically transformed gaming. As the visual quality of games has increased, game worlds have inched closer and closer to photorealism. In theory, the blurrier the line between game world and reality, the easier it becomes for players to engage with the unreal. Suspension of disbelief enables us to become invested in the world we are presented. But in recent years, gaming has worked towards something I like to call the suspension of the real. That elusive state in which the player becomes fully invested in the game world, as if it were their very own. This is where agency comes into play, both figuratively and literally. No matter if the world is made up of atoms or digits, wherever we are, we need to feel that we understand how the world works so that we know how to function inside of it. In 1967, sociologist J.M. Hensland studied a popular dice rolling game played by St. Louis cab drivers after their shifts. He observed that the drivers would alter their behavior depending on the number they needed from the dice. If they needed higher numbers, they would throw harder. If they needed lower numbers, then they would throw softer. However, unless your dice are fixed, dice rolling is objectively uncontrollable. And yet, these drivers still believe that they could have control over the outcome. My favorite example of this is something known as the cold dice problem. It's not uncommon for some Dungeons & Dragons players to blame the dice for runs of bad luck in their games. At that point, players are often told to buy a new set of dice, but, and this is the most interesting part, destroy the cold dice and make sure the new dice watch as a warning. I know 4 psychology PhDs who are avid gamers that actually follow this practice.
I only put them in timeout. I don't destroy them, but the other ones do have to watch.
So why does this matter to gaming and fear? Because of what happens when our sense of agency decreases. A decrease in the sense of agency contributes to a decrease in our sense of control. We feel more anxious when facing uncontrolled situations. The relationship between our sense of agency and negative emotional states, such as fear and anger, is not entirely understood, but we do know that when one increases, the other decreases. The bottom line is that as thinking, reasoning humans, we don't like to feel helpless. We want to believe that our actions can affect our environment because that is the foundation for how we even make sense of our environment. As an example, take the following scene from David Lynch's 1997 film, Lost Highway. At a party, Fred Madison, played by Bill Pullman, is approached by a mysterious stranger.
We've met before, haven't we? I don't think so. Where was it you think we met? At your house, don't you remember? No, I don't. Are you sure? Of course. As a matter of fact, I'm there right now. What do you mean you're where right now? At your house. That's fucking crazy, man. Call me. Dial your number. Go ahead. I told you I was here. How'd you do that? Ask me. How'd you get inside my house? You invited me. It is not my custom to go where I'm not wanted. Who are you? Give me back my phone. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Now ask yourself, why was that unnerving? Because it doesn't make sense. The stranger is seemingly capable of being in 2 places at once. And most importantly, one of those places is Fred's own home. It's a violation and a threat, and Fred cannot comprehend it, let alone devise a way to protect himself from it. So what happens when your world stops making sense? What happens when we slowly have our sense of agency stripped away and we are at the mercy of other forces? Enter Resident Evil 7. In the game, you play as Ethan Winters. He has received a cryptic video message from his wife, who was presumed dead after having gone missing 3 years ago while on a babysitting job. The message draws him towards a derelict plantation in Dulvey, Louisiana. Ethan travels alone to investigate, which is always a good idea in a horror story. From the moment you begin playing Resident Evil 7, it is immediately apparent that this is a game which is going to value atmosphere. In a shot that echoes the opening of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, a lone car is seen driving into isolation, leaving behind the safety net of society. I won't dwell too much on how gorgeous of a game this is because, well, look at it. From its very first shot, Resident Evil 7 makes it clear they're not messing around when it comes to atmosphere. The first moment we have control of the protagonist, the game makes the wise choice of doing nothing. There are little to no intrusions from gameplay mechanics, no mini-maps or flashing quest icons to lead us down the electronic breadcrumb trail left by the game designers. No, we are just given a natural direction to travel, and then we are on our own. With each step, we are drawn further into this world. This is the kind of game that wants you to feel the humid swamp around you, to feel your sweat-soaked shirt sticking to you while you swat away mosquitoes. The genius of this opening is how slowly the dial is turned, from logical to nightmare. Up until this point, we are just walking up to a house to try and find our wife. The gate is locked, no one answers the buzzer, no one even seems to be at home. So we start to follow the path around the side of the house. And this is where the tension begins. With each step, we begin to see signs that something is very wrong. Dead animal bodies, bizarre tableaus of bones and saw blades dangling from the trees. Are they artistic? Ornamental? Are they religious? We don't know. The signs get even more ominous. A seemingly abandoned van from a television show. A still smoldering pile of personal possessions. Mia's purse containing her half-burned ID. Then we see a way into the sprawling house. We enter, and from this point forward, the game was really just a series of closed doors the game designers dare you to open. When we finally slip inside the house, it is a perfect mix of the grotesque and the ominous. There's something ever so subtly sinister in these sights to make it clear that whatever is happening inside this house is wrong. This is disturbing. This is sinister. This is...
Joel, this is going to turn into a snuff film.
Oh, the Mads wouldn't do this. This is not a snuff film, I guarantee you.
And so begins a running theme throughout the game. Contamination and infection. Everything about this environment screams disease. Don't be surprised if playing this game makes you want to take a shower afterwards. This goes double if you play the game in VR. Oh yes, the game is available in VR. There are even some idiots who like the game so much they bought a second copy just so they could play it in the VR on the PS4. After some investigation, we find Mia imprisoned inside of a makeshift dungeon. She is surprised to see us and insists that she never sent us any message. When we try to escape, our attention is directed toward an unseen threat, a daddy who could find us at any second. We get separated from Mia and fear that she has been taken. But then, this happens. We watch as Mia is taken over and becomes a monster, attacking us until we are forced to protect ourselves by seemingly ending her life. The moment is horrific not only for the bloodshed and loss of life, but for the dynamics of what is actually happening here. Mia is fighting for control over her very body from something that can take her over and use her to try and kill the man she loves. Ethan is suddenly in a situation in which protecting himself means killing the woman he loves. Fair warning, what happens next is definitely not for the squeamish. Skip to this time code if you would rather not see this next part.
It fucking hurts! Ah! Now, let's see how you feel.
This moment is sheer horror, because at its core, a man is killing his wife because she has been taken over by something else. This is a theme that often comes up in horror stories. For example, the body snatcher genre. It's seen in everything from Edgar Wright's masterpiece At World's End, to the Evil Dead movies, to, well, Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Hold it. Okay, there might be another way of looking at this. In theoretical psychology, agency is taken up a little more philosophically. Simply defined, a being is said to be agentic if, given a circumstance, they can be said to be able to do otherwise. So from that perspective, I would agree that Mia's agency has definitely been stolen. Ethan's agency, on the other hand, is another matter. As a character in his world, Ethan has a lot of options, a lot of choices. Yes, he can fight, but he could also run, or he could choose to give up his life and self-sacrifice rather than harm his wife. However, Ethan is not just a character, he is also us, the avatar of the player. Agency has been taken from us. I read this moment as being very reminiscent of BioShock's Would You Kindly twist. You as the player have no choice, that is, if you want to keep playing through the rest of the game, as you could always choose to die or stop playing, but the game's very design has taken your choice from you. There is no running away, talking it out, or anything else from that matter. We are left to try and make meaning of a horrendous act, while at the same time we know that the choice is our only choice and really doesn't mean anything except that this is the hook that sets us, the player, up to progress through the rest of the game.
Now, as the great Forrest Gump says,
and that's all I have to say about that.
Oddly enough, I think one of the better examples of this is not even a horror movie. 1997's Face Off is generally regarded as one tremendously cheesy and goofy action movie, and with good reason. The story centers on an FBI agent who trades faces and identities with a comatose terrorist in order to prevent a bomb from wiping most of Los Angeles off the map. The terrorist later awakens from his coma and then forces the doctors to perform the same surgery on him. So now the two have completely swapped identities. The terrorist takes advantage of his stolen identity and arranges for the FBI agent to be imprisoned at a black site. The terrorist then goes to the FBI agent's home where no one is aware of the switch. And this leads to one of the most terrifying moments in the entire film, when the terrorist meets the FBI agent's teenage daughter. I saw this movie twice in the theaters. Both times, the scene generated a collective gasp from each member of the audience as they were terrified of what could happen next. Think about the horror of being a father and a husband and knowing that a monster is wearing your face and making himself at home with your daughter and wife, and there is nothing you can do about it. So what do you do when the monster is your loved one? Or even worse, when the monster is you? This is not a one-off moment in the game. It is a running theme throughout the entire story. It even leads to one of the most powerful moments in the game, a gut punch of a twist that we will get to later. For now, just keep it in mind, we will be getting back to it. Shortly after this, we are captured by the Baker family and treated to a dinner that is basically a reenactment of the notorious dinner scene from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We see that our hand has been reattached through some sort of rough surgery. And then we have food shoved into our mouths, the entire scene playing up our helplessness. Now what's intriguing here is how this contrasts with Texas Chainsaw. In that film, food was a major running theme, but it was food, meat. But the Bakers, they don't eat actual food. They're consuming rotted and spoiling garbage. It may have been meat at one time, but now it's waste. I really hope you're not watching this while eating. Having the garbage forced into our mouths is stomach-turning, largely because our evolved brains are screaming contamination. That revulsion you are feeling in watching this scene is your body responding to a perceived threat. What is infection but your body becoming vulnerable to something which can then potentially break down your physical agency? I mean, what is the greatest fear in becoming sick? It is becoming sick by something that our body cannot recover from. That is at the core of our fear about becoming infected and sick. One crudely attempted escape later, and we are back in control. And thus, the rest of the game begins. We move about the enormous house, always being pursued by the Baker family. When we attempt to get help from a police officer, the officer is brutally killed. We are on our own. We finally get the upper hand on Jack Baker in the garage. Or do we?
Ah, shit! Oh, yeah. I'm gonna take you for a ride. No!
Then comes the moment where we realize what exactly we are going up against. No matter what we do, the Baker family are going to come after us. Death itself is seemingly no longer a factor. Agency has been stripped away from us, and now we find ourselves in the second part of the psychology of fear: ambiguity.